Okay, so guys, I want to introduce Mr. Michael Bolton. Um, Michael is widely known around the world of testing, mostly, or I guess at least in part, due to the cool shirts he likes to wear during the conferences. If you see Michael in a conference, you will notice that he usually has a very cool shirt. I like your Hawaiian shirts, man, with the buttons up and stuff like that. Very classy. But now, seriously, I think that the thing that at least I hear most about Michael is his work on the rapid software testing methodology, something that you have been doing with James for a number of years right now, right?
That's right. 2006, I became a co-author. 2003 or 2004, I started teaching the class. 2004 it was. And yeah, 15 years now. Been doing
cool.
RST.
And again, rapid testing, it's rapid software test as it's called, it's actually pretty cool approach and methodology. And if you don't know it, then you can invite Michael and he'll be happy to teach you on it. You also write quite extensively on DevelopSense, your website / blog, or I don't know how to call it.
Which is in the process of being updated even as we speak.
I need to say that the UI, it's actually saying something that I guess might be done.
I'm more interested in the content.
Well, actually, I've been seeing that you're writing quite a lot lately. I actually saw the series of articles that you released about 2 weeks ago, was it?
Yeah, on breaking the test case addiction.
Exactly. And guys, one of the things that I really like about Michael, and it's challenging sometimes, when you get to talk to him, and I remember we were in Eurostar, was it? There was a panel, a roundtable session that we did on the last session, on the last minute on Eurostar that Dirk Yandergroth was actually moderating. And Michael wasn't even on the panel, he was actually sitting on the side.
That never slows me down.
Yeah. One of the things that you notice is that whenever Michael opened his mouth, you realize the depth. Meaning it's not only to talk about talk, you can talk quite a lot, but what I appreciate is basically the depth, and the most is the way that you go into the value of testing. We're not testing only for test matters. I mean, it's not about running scripts. It's testing in order to provide value. And I guess that's one of the things that touches me the most when I listen or even read about what you're doing in there. So it's quite an honor to be doing this.
Thanks. That's what I shoot for. I try to help people recognize that we have a purpose, and the purpose is to help people find trouble, help people find problems before they affect other people. That's a noble pursuit, and it's something that I think is more it needs to be spread more widely, that this idea that we're here to help defend the value of the product by helping people to understand it better, and by doing that by experimenting with it and exploring with it and investigating it and learning about it and passing that learning on to other people so our clients and our customers don't have to suffer.
I like that approach. Guys, more explicitly, what we're going to be doing today, and after talking to Michael, I think that this is the best approach, and I like this approach. This is going to be mostly a conversation, but it's not around topics of, I don't know, horseback riding and snow on the Appalachians, even though those are cool topics. We want to talk about requirements, and mostly how do we work on projects where requirements are not always there very well put, or places where we need actually to invest in order to gather those requirements. And the thing that it's funny / interesting is that even I have a podcast right now that I'm doing with Rob Lambert from the UK. And even after having talked about this point, we realized that every time we talk about it, it doesn't matter how much you talk about it, you're just scraping the top of the iceberg, because there's so much on this. It's such a meaningful thing that I think that many people don't obviously underestimate it, and they don't realize how problematic or how much of a chance we actually have in order to provide value here. And so I really, really like this topic. And again, I look forward to it. I do want to say, guys, we do have a Q&A. So as part of Zoom, by the way, a couple of things. First of all, we are recording this session, so hopefully it will be available after we're done. And the guys in my side actually recorded, we will make it available. But if you have questions, go ahead and use the Q&A. Please do not use the chat, because it's very hard to go over the chat. But if you have questions, put them on the Q&A, and I will try to interrupt as little as possible. Maximum will have time towards the end. Um, Now, the name of the session is there always requirement. You just need to know where to look for them. I personally think that it's relatively easy to find requirements if you really want to look for them. But many testers do not like that responsibility. They don't like the responsibility of actually, let's say, being in charge of or formalizing or organizing these requirements. Do you see that as often as I do? Do you think that's an issue for testers out there, and why?
My experience is that many testers complain that we don't have enough requirements, or we don't understand the requirements, or the requirements are bad or terrible. And there's a few options that we have with respect to that, and the primary my primary response to that is, okay, that is a problem for testing. It's an issue that we might not have documented requirements, or the requirements might not be very clear in the minds of the people who are chartering the project. Or it might be the case that there are requirements documents, but they're outdated, or they're confusing, or maybe they're wrong in some respects. And my response to that is, well, yeah, that is a problem for testing. And it's a problem that testing can help to solve. A bunch of this starts with the false idea that when we begin a project, everybody, or at least somebody, knows exactly what it should look like at the end. That somebody, somewhere, has a very sharp, very clear, very specific, very easy to articulate notion of what they want. And maybe sometimes we find that person, we bump into that person, we chat with them, we talk to them. And so based on that, somebody on the project goes out and writes a bunch of stuff down and makes some diagrams and produces some flowcharts and creates some data models and all that sort of stuff. And then as soon as we show it to them, they say, oh, yeah, but that's not really what I wanted. And people get all upset about that. I don't think we should get that upset about it, because people don't know everything about what they want. They don't know how to articulate what they want, and that's normal. That's okay. It's it's okay primarily because we start with our imaginations with this cloudy, vague notion of what we want to some degree, right? It might be fairly specific in some senses and not so much in others. And then we develop them. It's called software development for that reason. We develop requirements. We don't just write code to match up with the requirements documents that are written down, made available to us. And we don't test that way either. We don't test based on, well, we know exactly what the product's going to look like, and therefore we can write a bunch of test cases, and those test cases will be able to tell us deterministically whether there's a problem in the product or no problem in the product. That to me sounds just crazy. A much more appropriate way of thinking about it, I believe at least, is to say that requirements are developed, that the product is developed, that our designs for testing the product are developed. They get developed too. And that those things are circular. They happen in loops. And they happen in pools and eddies and so on, where each bit of development and each bit of testing and each bit of design feeds back around into other parts of the process. So when people tell me, oh, I don't have enough requirements, what I challenge them to do sometimes is to think about what's available to them and think about all the sources of information that they have. So can I do this thing? Can I put this up on the screen? Because we're going to do this live if you want.
Go for it.
All right, this sounds like fun. So here's what I'll do. First of all, I'll go to the Zoom window, and I'll get it bigger so that I can see what I'm doing here. And then I can go share. And then I can go to my mind mapping tool, my manager, share. Now what I'm going to do, Joel, can you see my screen here?
I can see I think it's my mapping tool, yes.
Okay, good. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in the center requirements. Okay, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to make it even more fun, what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest to people that they put in the, it's your call, chat or Q&A, that they put sources of requirements information. Just type in a word or a keyword or two suggesting what that is, and then you relay them to me and I'll type them in.
Okay, I have someone here saying Jira.
Jira. Okay, Jira. Good.
Okay, we've
Jira.
got, that was Kenya. We have Jogesh saying a recent project.
A recent project. Okay.
We have, I hope it's Christopher saying interviews.
Interviews. Good. Now we can, by the way, we can go more specific than this. For example, when we say a recent project, well, what specifically about the recent project? When we say interviews, interviews with whom specifically? Because you were talking about sort of admiring depth, and I like to go deep, and so let's go deep on some of these things. When you say interviews, Christoph, that's a great idea. Interviews with whom?
Interviews with whom? Well, we have
Let's see
other
if they come up.
points in here.
Yeah,
But
everybody's welcome.
Interviews
Yeah.
with a customer. I see here Paulina saying interviews with a customer, so it goes over there.
Customer, right?
Interviews with the project or product manager or architect.
Project. Whoops. Yeah, have you ever noticed when you're being watched, you can't type? Project manager, architect.
Don't tell me about it. I do demos of PractiTest all the time, and the worst
Yeah.
developers. Why not a developer?
Developers. Excellent. Good.
Application manager. I guess that's like a product owner.
Application manager. Sure. Well, lots of people have different words for this, so we can put those words to use. Why not? Just to remind us, just in case we've got a different.
Well, you know what? Joe Truscott is saying something that it's a little bit weird, that he's saying go ahead and interview testers.
Testers? That's not weird. Testers are sometimes some of the best sources of information available on a project.
Some of my best friends in the world are testers.
Hey, some of your most knowledgeable ones too.
I think those are the same.
Might be.
Let's go for support managers, and I guess that we can leave it in there because, again, people are putting other stuff. By the way, people are putting other very cool stuff in here.
All right, what else? What else are they putting in? Come on, let's see.
We have legacy code, for example.
Legacy code. Oh, that's cool. That's a cool place to look, because what's interesting about legacy code to me is that you can look in legacy code, and if it's well structured, well commented, well documented, sometimes you can see the progression of ideas, why the code has developed the way it has. Joel Spolsky points out that a ground-up rewrite of a product is a terrible idea. He's being a little bit he's exaggerating a little bit for effect, but also it is to some degree a terrible idea, because that old code, that code that looks kind of crufty, maybe it hasn't been refactored for a long time, maybe it has, but he says that old code has been tested. It's been tested in the field. It's been tested by experience, and all those little things that look like sloppiness to certain developers, they might actually be lessons from experience, workarounds to actual problems that people encountered in the field.
It's basically the difference between a Band-Aid and a tourniquet, and when you cannot differ between both of them, you're in big trouble.
Well, but that's an interesting thing too about legacy code, is that you can see when people have mistaken Band-Aids for tourniquets, and you can see where sometimes you can see where the blood's been cut off and the limb is starting to fall off. So okay, legacy code is a great one. Let's see what else we can get.
I liked another one that it's here because I've used it in the past. Regulations.
Regulations, absolutely.
When you have them, they're very, very good.
They can be really helpful because regulations can be informative in one sense, but they can also be actual, honest to goodness requirements. The product must do this. That's useful to know that. And so many testers who work in regulated environments, it seems to me, go by folklore. They go by what people tell them instead of investigating what do the regulations actually say. And the whole series I did recently on FDA documentation underscored that the FDA doesn't say anything in particular about scripted testing, and it does say very positive things about exploratory testing. Exploratory testing being the basis for testing, scripting being a kind of guest in the household, as I've been saying a lot.
Really? Never noticed that. I'll take a look later.
Well, see, see now. Okay, so regulations. What else do we have?
Okay, we have quite a bunch, but there's another one here.
Let's just brainstorm them out quick as you can.
There's one here that I'm not sure how much I agree with it. I know about the value, but what do you think about user logs?
User logs. User logs? Are you kidding me?
User logs are great in order to understand usage, but when I try to look into behavior, the desired behavior of the product, then I might see it when I see an exception or something like that, or I can get a validation of whether what I did was good or not.
Well, you can get some information. See, this is the thing. Imagine you're an investigator. Okay, you're an investigator, and you're trying to solve a mystery of some sort. Only very regularly will you get a signed confession. More of the time you have to collect clues. So that's why I want to be expansive about this, because what I'm looking for here is not something that will conclusively tell us how the product should be. What I'm looking for is something that provides us with a clue that something might be wrong. That's
in that sense, I'm 100% with you.
Okay, so what do we have after user logs then? As long as I've got you to agree, you don't have to say anything more.
Oh, wow. Oh, God. Gaps in requirements found by applying, for example, classification tree methods for test specifications, and I'm not sure what to do with that.
Oh, now you see, this is where I kind of classification trees. Okay, if you want to use those, I'm not a big fan of them, but let's put them on the list, right? Let's not rule anything out.
Okay, go for business rules. Heather,
business rules. Okay, good.
Heather is actually saying
business rules. Good. What else?
Well, business process is very close.
Business
legacy
process.
code, we already talked about it. Go and talk to your infrastructure team and your DevOps.
Okay, so infrastructure team.
Bug reports. Whoa, how did we miss this one?
DevOps. Yeah, well, there you go. DevOps. 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 Bug reports. Good. What else?
Competitors.
Competitive products. I don't want to miss the bug reports. Competitive products. Competitive products. Good. What else?
The sales pitch. More specifically, what do clients expect from you?
Sales speech. Oh, well, wait a second. Those are two different things.
One is your sales pitch, and that is what your
sales pitch.
Saying,
okay, I've got to take into account the fact that I might not be interpreting what you're saying exactly correct. So sales pitch, and then what clients want. Okay, how we determine that is always sort of interesting, isn't it? I would go deeper on that one maybe, and maybe to the person who put that on the list. Let's delve into how might they discover that.
Melissa, you're being asked, what do you mean by? Wait, no, this is not Melissa. Let me check. Sorry. Making here. Oh God, where is it? We have so many people talking here.
28, 29 entries in the Q&A.
No, and I'm going right now over the chat.
Okay.
Yes. Well, Melissa, what do clients expect? So you can go ahead and talk more.
Yeah, help us out with that, Melissa. What else we got?
Manuals.
Manuals. Oh, user manuals. Fantastic.
Well, that's like documentation, I guess.
Yeah.
Leadership goals for the product. I guess this might be your company vision and mission, maybe.
Now, that's interesting. That's a really interesting one to me because have you ever noticed those things never say anything specific about what the product should do? But
if you have a good the vision, no, but if you have a good mission, you might be able to check what the product should not be doing.
That's really interesting. So I mean, we might even add that. Let's put that as a sub for the moment. What the product should do, and maybe what it shouldn't do. That would be kind of useful. Where I was going with that was that if you've got leadership goals, maybe they don't say anything specific, but you can make inferences, right? If this product is to be consistent with our company goals, if this product is to be consistent with what leadership wants, if this product is inconsistent with a stated goal, then we've got a problem here.
Cool.
So, but that's not necessarily something that's explicit. Sometimes it's inferential and tacit. sometimes we have to make connections between what somebody is saying they believe in, what our goals are, and what the product actually does. And that's not necessarily a straight line, but that's part of the skill of the tester to link those things up.
I think I'm with you on that. I think that that's one of the best parts, especially not when you're gathering information, but when you need to basically make sense of conflicting stuff. And if you have conflicting stuff, you need to basically try to understand how do you differentiate? What do you keep and what do you leave out?
So, that's something I'm even going to put on the list right as it is right now, which is let me see if I can come up with a good way of expressing it. Recognizing consistencies and inconsistencies, but generally, right? Very generally, I'm going to call that recognizing the inconsistent. And there's a method to my madness here, by the way.
I'm very anxious to understand it. By the way, Melissa got back to us.
Okay, great.
She said there's been a case where we've been delivering a particular feature, but the sales team marketed it as a different way. So we had a misaligned requirement. So it's always worth seeing if we're on the same page.
Okay. How did you find out about that, though? What was the means of communication for that? So I'll wait for Melissa to do that. Are there any other things from the list there, Joel?
We have compliance, security guidelines.
Oh, security guidelines, excellent.
Security
and then
good.
Guidelines, compliance,
surveys. We have surveys.
Surveys. Oh,
if
sure.
your marketing was good enough to do surveys.
Yeah,
that's
good. And then compliance, you mentioned there.
We have something here that I'm not sure how to digest it.
Okay.
Wait, where is it? Notes from the lessons learned sessions.
Oh, from lessons learned. Retrospectives.
Well, yeah, feedback from retrospectives. I guess that's perfectly okay. Oh, there's one here that we hadn't talked about.
What's that?
Among other stuff, UX designers. When you talk to people from the UX people. Yes,
that's right.
People should be able to work with your product.
As usual, yes. I get this complaint sometimes from documenters or from user designers, right? As usual, the product documented itself. Right? As usual, the product designed itself. And you get the same kind of complaint from testers. Oh, yeah.
Wait a second. Do we have old test plans?
Old test plans, good.
We have testers. We don't have old test plans. That's good.
Right. Okay, good. What else we have?
Well, I guess that's project tender documents. That's a nice one.
Oh, that's a really good one. Sure. Yeah. If you're working in environments where it goes out for public tender or where it goes out for a bid, yeah, that's good.
By the way, as I'm going over here, just a small note to Paul White. Yes, we are recording, and yes, hopefully it will be made available later on for those who lost the connection.
Yeah, and for those who want to crib from this list too. So, do you see any themes here, Joel? I'll ask you. Do you see any sort of patterns or groupings that we might reasonably put?
Again, on a very, very high level, I see on the one hand stakeholders.
Okay, stakeholders. I'm going to use a special word for stakeholders in this context, okay? And you're absolutely right. Stakeholders is what it is. I'm going to call it, though, conference for reasons which will become clear in a minute. Do you see any other patterns?
I see, I'm not sure how to call it, but historical evidence.
Artifacts.
Historical artifacts, yes. When we go over previous versions or stuff like that, I see also...
things you can point to. Artifacts.
Business information.
That's true, but it could come from an artifact or it could come from a conversation with somebody, right?
Oh, got it.
Okay, so I'm going to refer to artifacts as reference.
Okay. Do you want to put their oracles in any sense?
Well, that's an interesting thing because all of these can be oracles.
All of these are actually oracles if you look at them.
They can be used by oracles, yeah. Or they can be used as oracles, I mean. Here's the two other categories I'm going to put on. I'll cut to the chase. One is experience. Now, we don't have very many of those listed at the moment, but maybe the idea that we've got this category will help us to list a few more. And then one more, which is inference. Inference is about that thing I was talking about, the connections between consistency and inconsistency, right? If this is true and this is true, then we can infer that this is going to be true as well. If this is a product designed for a mobile platform, then I can infer that we're probably going to want to perform some testing on various, and it's not necessarily clear, but it gets us started, iOS and Android platforms. And then we can start to ask the questions, well, which ones specifically? Which ones are left out? Which ones are we not going to look at? Which ones are we going to look at? And recognizing as we do that no matter what we do, it's always going to be a subset of what's there. We're going to have to model the test space. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create an affinity analysis of this, and I'm going to look at the sales pitch. I'm going to say that's an artifact, so that's a reference. Compliance documents, that's reference 2. Recognizing the inconsistent, that's inference. We've got bug reports, those are references. We've got support managers. Conference, those are people we talk to. Jira. Oh, now Jira is weird. Jira is weird because, is it inference or is it conference because other people are using it, or is it an artifact because other people are writing records
if I cannot put it under both, I would actually make it a reference.
You'd make a reference? Okay, I will too. And that's the point. You can surveys is like that too. I'm going to put surveys under conference just for giggles. The important thing is not to get all about whether it should be in one category or the other. As long as it appears on the list, we're okay, right? We're doing good. So we got user manuals, those are references. We got legacy code, that's definitely reference. Got regulations, those are references. We've got user logs. User logs are kind of experience-y, you know? I mean, they are artifacts. And bug reports are like that too. UX designers is conference. A recent project, that's experience. And we can, if we think about all the experiences we've had from a recent project, what's cool about that is some of them are not explicit. Some of them are tacit. But
like what? Give me an example.
Let's see. On our recent project, we learned that let's just say we learned that our unit checks were very good at covering stuff at the component level, but we didn't get sufficient coverage at the interface level. And the reason we didn't do that is because there weren't sufficient testability hooks that we could pump a lot of data through the system that way. So, but nobody's actually said that. We've learned it and we sort of get it, but nobody's said it. So, but our experience has provided us with information which, with potentially useful information, which if we consulted it, would help us on this project too.
Got it.
So that's the idea there. So testers, definitely conference. Interviews, well, gee whiz. It depends on what you look at, doesn't it? Because it could be, an interview is obviously a conference, but it also generates a document or a record of
it depends if you're talking about the action or the document or the outcome.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter. As you said, as long as it's there.
Yeah, as long as it's on the list. Project manager, we got architect, and I see every now and again I see stuff going through the. I see these little flashes at the top of the screen where we have people contributing more to our lists, and at a certain point we can say let's not. Maybe you'll put business rules under inference just for fun. Competitive products, that's a form of experience, isn't it? Interacting with those things and learning about them. Classification trees. They get developed, don't they? We develop those. So some ways they're inference, some ways they're experience. Let's put them under inference.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit more inference to me. Even though you put it under the requirements, it's not under interface. You made them their own.
Yeah. Let's see, developers, Business processes. Well, we can go from, because those are always models, right? We can go to those as inferences. Oh, that's interesting. Come on, help me out here. There we go. That's better. All right. So now we'll rebalance the map, and let's see. I always keep forgetting how to balance the map with it. They always shift the guide. There it is, right there, down there. Okay, so hey, this is pretty good. We've got a bunch of these things laid out. Of course, there's an easy way to remember the construction of this list too, which is to go to reference and inference and conference and experience. Where's that old test plans thing? Oh, project tender documents. That's reference. And then we have old bug reports too, somewhere on the list. I forget where it went. I didn't see where it went. Old test plans, that's experience. There we go. Notes from lessons learned. Okay. So if we think in terms of reference, inference, conference, and experience, RICE, RICE, little acronym to help remember it. But here's the cool thing about all this, to me.
Yep.
I don't think the problem is that we don't have requirements. I think requirements are everywhere, all around us, if we bother to look for them. I think maybe a bigger problem is trying to sort out which are actual requirements and which are merely sources of information that aren't really requirements, but might be nice to haves, or might be things that we want to avoid. So I think that's the job that we're wrestling with. I think testers, a lot of the time, especially testers who are really into confirmation, demonstration, showing that the product does what we expect, they're looking for something that will definitively say, this is what the product should do, and this is what the product should not do. And I get that. My trouble with it is it doesn't lead to great testing, it seems to me. What it leads to is confirmation and demonstration, showing that the product can work instead of investigating whether the product has problems in it.
I like that approach. And by the way, well, it doesn't. I'll bring this later. Someone actually wrote something else, but I'm with you on that. And when I was preparing for this session today, I usually do that. You know, I take some time. I don't tell my team that I'm actually preparing. I tell them that I'm thinking about the product or something like that.
Right.
And I think that people, the biggest problem is not that we don't find requirements. I think that the biggest problem is that A, requirements are blurry, and that's even a good case. B, many times we actually get conflicting requirements.
Sure.
And that is where actually it becomes interesting. What happens if someone tells you A, but a document tells you B, and if you go to, again, another one of these areas, you actually get a C, and there's no clear hierarchy. If there's a clear hierarchy, you're okay.
Okay,
But
now you're saying that whole problem, or that whole set of circumstances, you're saying that set of circumstances is a bug to you, right? It's something that bugs you. I mean, it's a problem.
I think that it's more challenging for a tester. You have a tester that at the end of the day doesn't feel that he has, or she has, let's be equal here, she has the authority to come and say, hey guys, the system should do this. No, wait a second, that's the job.
Oh, no. Hang on. That's not the tester's job, it seems to me. The tester's job is to shine light on these conflicts. Because if I, as the tester, don't understand what the product should be doing, or I don't understand, I can't tell the difference between bug and no bug, problem and no problem, what are the developers doing? How do they know what they're doing? I want to shine light on the fact that there is a confusion in the project about this stuff, that there are conflicting sources of information, and part of my job as a tester is to shine light on that confusion so that people can get it resolved.
Okay, so how do you do it? Meaning, let's say that I'm a tester and I come to you, Michael, I have a problem. I have conflicting requirements. I have people telling me A, documentation telling B, and what's worse of it, I have different people telling me A and B together.
Who am I when you're asking me that question?
You're my coach and I'm a tester in my team.
Okay, so if I'm your coach, my reply to you would be to ask, well, who has authority over the product? Who has product making decisions? Who has decision making authority?
So I need to for you're saying, hey, if you have conflicting issues, go and try to look for the formal or higher most top person who can actually make that call.
That's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do more practically in very large organizations where you might not ever have met that person is James had a nice way of thinking about this. It's kind of funny. Think higher. Think higher. Like, who hired me? That
Oh,
kind of think higher.
that higher.
Right. Who am I working for? The person to whom I'm reporting is the person to whom I say, here's what I'm seeing in this. This looks like a problem for the project. Whoever is above you, maybe I know them, maybe I don't know them, but whoever is above you, dear testing client, my primary client, I think they might want to know about this. I don't have to make the decision. It's not my job as a tester to be judge or jury over the product or the product. Did I say the product or the product? Project or the product. It's not my job to run the project. It's not my job to be the designer or the author or the constructor of the product. It is my job, I would argue, to identify things that threaten the value of the product or that threaten the on-time successful completion of the project. And conflicts and confusion and even fights that I see, opinions of people who matter, and disagreements between those people, those are important clues that maybe something isn't exactly right on the project. And I keep going back to this thing. If I don't know what constitutes a bug, what constitutes something consistent with what people want from the product, how do the developers know that? And my first order guess is that they don't. And so I want to bring that to the attention of people who matter and who can make decisions about that stuff.
But haven't you seen the situations where, and again, maybe when we start working on more agile projects where the team has more authority, okay? Yes, you still, in theory at least, should have a product owner. But the team actually comes up with the user story. And maybe the product owner was not very involved in that. And a developer starts working on that. And then it becomes basically my word, and the developer gives me that product, I'm testing it and say, hey, you know what? I don't think that this is what we meant to do. And the developer says, well, this is what I understood from it, because the requirement obviously was not clear enough. And many times they're not going to be clear enough. Do I always need to go back and basically get my product owner involved? Should I actually start using other means? Because I've used other means in the past to try to
bring them.
Well, one of the things that I try to tell people as much as possible is that experience is the tool here. And that is why, as I'm a very big advocate of having testers work directly with customers. Okay, if you find a way of doing it, for example, in a company I used to work with, because the testers knew the product so well, then we basically became tier 2 for product support and professional services. So we sent testers to the professional services. And when we got back to the development teams, the fact that we were able to say, hey, it's not that I think customers work like this, it's because customer X from company Y works that way, then your word starts having a bigger weight on the discussion.
You see, I think that's a great idea. And yet, it's not an answer to the question that I had, or the question that you had, rather, which is, it's great for the tester to have that evidence, to have those conferences with the customer, to have the experience. I'll see your suggestion and go one better, which is, wherever possible, we get really fabulous testing from testers watching customers do work, watching people do their actual jobs, and looking at the stumbling blocks that they run into, and seeing how people repair, this is a word that comes to me from Harry Collins, how people repair the difference between what the machinery is doing for them and what they actually want to get done. How people repair differences in communication or problems in communication. Here's an example. When I ask my wife whether we want to have noodles or rice for dinner, I'll say, "How about rice?" And she'll say, "Hmm." Now, a computer would not be able to make any sense of but because we're human, we can do that. So watching people interacting with the product or just doing their regular jobs and trying to make inferences about how our product might fit with that job or not fit so well. I think that's a fabulous idea. And to come back to the meeting and say to the programmers, well, this isn't, this is the way you design it, but I don't think this is the way customers are going to do that. What's the developer going to say? Maybe the developer is going to say, oh, thank you, tester. I will adjust the product accordingly. Or maybe the developer will say, I don't think so. I don't think so. I am a developer and I've been a developer for many years and I know how
I
people
love
work.
those.
Right?
Yeah.
But neither one of us is supposed to be making the call. I'm not the designer of the product and neither is the programmer, except in the domain of the actual linking of the program, the code in the program to accomplishing some purpose. But in terms of the design of the product or what the product does or what the scope of the product is, that's neither one of us, not really. Not really.
There's a comment here from Lisa that actually explains something they have in their systems actually in the chat. She says
By the
that
way, I can make this go away now. I can stop sharing.
I think that people really like it, but maximum will send to people. They say that I'm going to quote her. We have a feedback loop with clients. So using client test environments, they got to preview the release to see if that's what they wanted or needed, and if it integrates to their systems, and if not, they actually let us know. So basically what she's saying is that they have a very, the way that I see it is basically an open staging environment or an open beta environment where people can actually play with, and a closed loop to that. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. But again, back here, my problem with this is that this is more of basically an end-of-loop verification more than a kind of requirement gathering process.
Sure, but first of all, products are iterative, right? We tend to build them, and we tend to build them in several versions. So if we don't use it for this set of requirements, we can use that as, what do we got here? Notes from lessons learned, retrospectives, right? That's on our list of project information. So we can apply that to future revisions of the product, future builds of it. So that's one thing. But another thing is the process of doing that on its own, assuming we got nothing particularly new from it, the process of doing that is a way of building rapport and relationships with customers. It's a way of building trust. Finally, I would also add that that process of getting information from customers has to be treated with a little bit of skepticism, in the sense that customers, by their nature, mostly, and I'm generalizing here, but mostly if we say to a customer, here, test this, how do you like it? They'll say, pretty good. Yeah, it's okay. I did a couple of things on it and it seems to work. We got to be a little bit careful about that and change the mission for the customers to, it's really important for us to know about any problems in this product. So that's what we'd like you to focus on. Not, can you get some work done with this? Where we would like you to direct your attention is anything that would slow your work down, anything that would make your work harder, anything that you found confusing or irritating or annoying or frustrating, or that caused impatience for you, or that surprised you in either a good way or a bad way. Because if it's a surprise to you but it's good, maybe the customer support people might want to know about this happy surprise so that they can explain it more easily to other people as they're giving them support. Did you find anything in the product that excited you? Because we can take that information to the marketing people and help them to tell the story of the product better that way. Oh, look, here's this other thing we didn't even realize it was a feature of the product, and now we've got a customer using it in some novel or interesting way that can benefit other customers too. So what we become as testers is investigative reporters, journalists. But in the process of working with customers, one thing we want to try to emphasize, make sure we don't downplay it or gloss over it, is we want to know about problems in the product so that we can get them fixed for you, dear customer, like that.
This reminds me of something. And again, I listen quite a lot to the A/B testing podcast by Alan Page and Brent Jensen. Not sure if you know the guys, but one of the things that I like about it is they put quite a lot of emphasis on data analysis and data science of existing customers. And granted, this is something that works mostly for DevOps teams and teams with hosted systems, but at least in our case, in practice, it works very well. And one of the things that we're doing, we're not even asking anymore. Let me tell you, let me give you an example. So we understood that PractiTest is a test management tool, and again, cool system and everything, but we only supported scripted testing, main scripted testing. And we started seeing people who were basically abusing the system in order to try to organize their session-based testing tests on the fly.
Now you say abused. Remember I used the word repair? They're repairing the system.
They improved the system.
There you go.
Yeah, so basically what we did, we came up and we developed exploratory testing into PractiTest. Again, I don't care if it's whatever we want to call it, but another module. We made a big boom out of it. And what we saw is that the first week, a lot of people were using it. Second week, less people. And by the third week, only a trickle of people were using it. So we understood, not even by asking them, just by looking at the data, that something was wrong. Then you go and you investigate what's wrong with it. And we found a couple of design flaws, very insignificant, but once we fixed them, wow, then you started seeing people actually, they say in Hebrew, you vote with your feet. Basically, yeah, in Hebrew it sounds a lot better, but you don't need to ask them. You actually see it. And that's a good point, because people are going to be doing it or not, and that's your validation, basically.
Well, I appreciate what data can tell us, or at least some inference. See, data, when you talk about data analysis, you might think of that as reference. But I think a lot of what goes into data analysis is inference, and we should be careful about inference. And the reason we should be careful about it is twofold. First of all, there's a big difference between data and information.
Definitely.
All right. So there's a big difference between data and information. And some people say, oh, the data speaks for itself. No, it doesn't speak for itself. That's the voices in your head speaking. Right?
There are actually fields for that.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to say about this is, though, I got a bit of a beef against our tendency these days in the world to mediate stuff. For instance, somebody brought up Jira right away, but Jira itself is not communication. Jira is a tool that affords communication, that helps us to communicate sometimes. But as the Agile principles state, there's no substitute for face-to-face communication. Face-to-face communication is the best way of communicating things. That's why small teams are important, but that's why, as you mentioned, interaction with customers is really important. And I'm going to tell you a little secret, Joel. This is just for you, okay? It's just for you.
No one's listening. All good.
Yeah, okay, good. Just for you. James Bach would be really interested in having somebody talk to him about how he would design a tool for session-based test management. I'm just putting that out there.
Can I tell you a secret?
Yeah.
I have a meeting with him in 2 days about it. But don't tell
Really?
anyone.
Isn't that interesting? Okay. Well, you might want
Don't, please,
to.
that's only between the two of us.
All right. All right. All right. But on a more serious basis, that is something that can be applied, I think, to every project productively, which is not only for the designers to talk to potential customers, but for the testers to do that too. And a lot of organizations will say, "Oh no, we can't possibly have testers talking to customers. The whole world would come to an end. Our basis of reality." If that's the case, very often what I do is, once again, I don't tell anybody, but I just go out and do it, and I don't worry very much about getting into trouble. The last thing I want to do is do bad work because I was afraid of getting into trouble for it.
By the way, but I do appreciate that for sometimes the tester, he's not going to be able even to travel or do anything like that. I think that if you're not able to meet the customer directly, there are always good proxies that you can go to. And if that's going to be your support team, even your sales team, if you can go to the customer, don't stop to go to that proxy, because you will get information at the end of the day.
There's that, and there's something else which didn't show up on our list, by the way, our list of where we might get requirements-related information. And that is, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a whole world of social media out there where people are jabbering about all kinds of stuff, including our own products. Go to Google, and in the search box, type the name of your product and then the word sucks.
I have an alert for that. Don't worry.
Or problems, or benefits, or traps, or workarounds. A tester sitting in a room practically anywhere in the world can get access to an enormous amount of information through the World Wide Web. Tell you a funny story. When I was at QuarterDeck years and years ago, this is the longest single place I ever worked. So there's lots of stories from that. I used to go to trade shows because I was in a technical support role, but the Canadian office was small enough that I would go out to all the trade shows in Canada that our company went to. The boss would usually take me along. And people would come up to me and talk about various things related to our products and to our company. And I remember this one guy telling me, yeah, I've been on CompuServe. CompuServe is what we used to call the internet, what old people used to call the internet. Says I was on CompuServe, and the support guys there are really great. Stafford Williamson, he's really good. He was a support guy. Dan Spear really seems to know his stuff. Dan Spear wrote the product, okay? But Dan just hung out there and provided technical support. But the reason he did that was because he wanted to find out how people were actually using the product. And as testers, we can do that too. And we can do that especially because, I don't know whether QuarterDeck was special or not so special, but what I remember from that era, the world was a smaller place then, was that our developers spent a lot of time on our own support forums, sometimes in read-only mode, sometimes just lurking, but also quite frequently they themselves would provide support, and they would recognize problems the customers were having with the product and could fix them quietly, such that when Stafford Williamson, the tech support guy, came back to Dan and says, a customer seems to be having this kind of problem with QAMM 386 on a Milex motherboard with a Phoenix BIOS, Dan would say, yeah, I noticed that. I fixed it already. So,
I know that too much. Man, we have about 5 more minutes, and even though there are plenty of questions, there are 2 here that actually draw my attention.
Stand
and
up?
I want to honor these guys. Paul Craig is saying here, and rightly so, I'm not getting much about testing without requirements. Rather, it seems like requirements gathering here. If anything, we're reinforcing that we need requirements before we test. What do you think about that?
So I'm not sure. In response to that, I would say to Paul, I'm not sure what you mean by requirements. Then this is not testing out without requirements. Let me make the point explicit. There are requirements flying around all over the place, or maybe desirements, right? Things that people want from the product and things that people don't want from the product. And part of our job as testers is to help people who are actually declaring the requirements recognize what those are. In that same sense, we're never testing without requirements. We are testing in a world, a kind of soup of confusion and conflicting information, and it's our job as testers, I would argue, to help sort that out. So we're never testing without requirements. What we're testing with is a lot of uncertainty. And that's what I think an important part of our role is. To help people get to the bottom of what the requirements actually are.
I like that question. Nothing even to add in there.
And let's follow up with Paul. Make sure that he is okay with that. We'll do that while we're answering the next question.
Yes, and here's another one, and this one actually, I think that it's a good point of someone who's trying to be careful. Mm-hmm. What is a good sign that that as a tester, your own inferences are getting in the way of your work?
Are getting in the way of your work or supporting it, or both?
I guess that's getting in the way. If they're supporting it, you're okay. But it's like when you're not willing to accept that you're not right.
Oh, okay. Skeptical. If you're skeptical about yourself, sure. What I would do in order to prevent that is I would do this incredible, radical, new thing that more and more people are beginning to discover: talking to people. Show people your work. Talk to them and ask, and it's especially important for the product owner, but other people on the team and other testers, make your inferences explicit and say, this is what I gather from this process. This is what I've come to understand. What do you think? What do you think? And some people will reply almost immediately, oh, well, we don't have time for that. Okay. How much time do you have to fix stuff where you've gone on the wrong path for a while? Little check-ins with people, little bursts of conversation, mapping out your work, creating lists of things, and sharing them with other people. It seems to me that's the essence of what collaborative software development is all about. This continual conversation where we take advantage of all the brains in the project community, all the problem-solving power that we've got in the project community, all the problem detection power that we have in the project community, putting those things to work in a collaborative way, making time for each other, right? That's another part of it too, which is offering up time. See, everybody thinks that that's, or not everybody, I'm exaggerating. Many people think that that is an interruption to our work. I disagree. I think it's the essence of our work, is trying to come to a set of shared feelings and shared mental models about what the requirements are, about what the product is and what it does, and about what the ideas so far, implicit, tacit, unexpressed, untold, what those things are, and getting them out on the table so that we can look at them and examine them and compare them and contrast them. That, it seems to me, is what we're doing when we're doing software development in groups of people. That's harnessing the power of our collective minds and our collective imaginations.
Okay, we're like completely out of time, but there are two questions here that are very, very close related. And with that, I want to end it here. Connor and Kenya here are basically going into the fact that, hey, you know what? I barely have enough time in my sprint to test as it is. And it's clearly not my job to be defining the product. How should I do it? I mean, this is not my job. What am I doing it? And what can I do about it?
I'm not talking about, testers should not be defining the product in my mind. Testers should not be defining the product, but they should be understanding the product. They should be helping themselves and other people towards a comprehensive understanding of the product and the problems in it. Now, this does not have to be laborious. This does not all have to be written down. But let me just flip it over and say the alternative is to test without an understanding of the product, without an understanding of requirements, without feeding back what we've learned from testing back into the process of developing the requirements and developing the product. That's the alternative, not doing that stuff. All right, how far are we going to get if we don't involve ourselves in that? And I'm not saying that testers suddenly turn into requirements writers or requirements documents creators or requirements casters, makers. But as testers, it is essential for us to develop an understanding of the requirements ourselves, whether they're stated, explicit, tacit, implicit, whether they're widely shared or narrowly shared. It's our job as testers to shine light on that, to help with that.
I like that, and I also think that as testers, one of the things that we need to make sure is that, again, it's not only about testing, it's about quality. And if we're not able to define as a team the product, let's say in a way, because there are multiple ways of defining it, then we will end up having we will be either very lucky or we will end up with a quality issue. So we should be able to put that point forward and say, hey, we cannot move forward because it's not clear enough, and it's not wasting time, it's just clarifying something.
So to conclude, can I put up there's a talk that is now incorporated into the to the way I teach rapid software testing.
Sure.
It's from a series of experiences that we had working with a company that made medical devices. And that company was very into formal testing, and yet they were doing it in a way that was kind of premature. Let's look at just these few slides. And in order to do that, I also have to share my screen.
And we have about 2 minutes before they're going to just kick me out or something.
Okay. So let me share this. And there it is, right there.
Not yet.
Okay.
Wait.
See it?
Now we're there. Yes.
Okay. So formal testing, which must be done in a specific way, is at the essence of where medical devices are tested. But most of the time, your testing doesn't have to be too formal. And in order to do great formal testing, you have to do great informal testing first to figure out what you want to test formally and how you want to do it. So we don't know what the requirements are. At the beginning of the project, I'm going to say that there are lots of requirements that are unclear, unspecified, unstated, assumed, tacit, unshared. We don't know what those requirements are, what they should be, what they could be, what they really mean until after we've tested. And we don't know how to test them until after we've tried to test them to some degree, right?
Uh-huh.
So the dirty secret of formal testing is based on this idea that requirements are ideas. They're not documents. They're not documents. They're ideas at the intersection between what we want, what we can have, and how we might decide that we've got it, and that requires testing. And testing is how we learn difficult things. So the dirty secret of formal testing is that all good formal testing must begin with informal testing. All good requirements come from testing not so good requirements.
You're basically saying we need to refine our not so good requirements by testing them.
That's one way we refine them, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for this, Joel.
It has been a great time talking to you, man. I really, really appreciate it. And again, Michael, I had a blast. So I want to thank you for the time here. Guys, sorry that we couldn't get to all your questions. Some of them were very, very good. But again, thanks for joining. And Michael, I hope that we get to do it again.
Tell you what, Joel, you've asked me to do a guest blog for you.
We can actually do it. Cool. Yes.
How about we take those questions and I'll do a guest blog for you that addresses those questions as best I can.
I'll make sure to download all of them and I'll send it to you so that we can take it from there.
Dude, thank you very much. What a great day.
Excellent, man. Nice talking to you.
All the best. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.